How did Apple start? Apple was co-founded in 1976 on April the 3rd by the three co-founders, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne. Their idea was to develop and sell personal computers. Apple was incorporated as Apple Computers Inc. in 1977, January the 3rd, but was later renamed as Apple Inc. on January the 9th, 2007. At the same time, Steve Jobs announced the release of the first ever Apple phone at the Macworld convention. He stated that it would be released later that year, in June. And that was when the first ever iPhone was released. The creation of the first iPhone was classified as top secret and was called Purple, Project Purple. Apple has been involved in ongoing suing and counter-suing court cases with numerous rival phone companies. It all began in 2009. The reason regarding the design of their tablet computers and smartphones. Apple's first ever logo. The first ever Apple logo was drawn by Ronald Wayne in 1976. It is a picture of Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree. That is where Isaac supposedly discovered gravity by an apple falling on his head. Ronald also wrote the manual for the first ever Apple computer and also the original partnership agreement between the three men. Despite selling his 10% share of the company 12 days later for just $800, he was re-invited back numerous times but refused the offer and accepted another $1,000 to forfeit any future claims against Apple Computers Inc. Apple's first ever product. Apple's first ever computer was released in 1976. They called it Apple I. It was priced satanically at $666.66. Co-founder Steve Wozniak said he priced it without realizing, as he said he priced it 1/3 over the wholesale price, which was $500. The Macintosh computer, Mac. The name Macintosh for the Apple computers began in 1979 by Jeff Raskin, Apple's 31st employee. He was the manager of publications. He came up with the name Macintosh as he wanted to name the computer after his favorite apple, the Macintosh apple. Why Apple are called Apple? Steve Jobs thought of calling the company Apple as he came back from the Apple farm. He thought the name sounded fun, spirited, and not intimidating. Steve Wozniak was concerned about this as the Beatles band had a record called Apple Record. They tried to think of better names, but they did not come up with anything sounding better. Steve's concern was right as the Beatles label, Apple's Records, sued Apple Computers Inc. back in 1981 for $80,000. A condition of the settlement was that Apple Computers agreed not to enter the music business, and Apple Records agreed not to enter the computer business. But in 1991 Apple Records had Apple Computers back in court, as an employee from Apple Computers named Jim Rekas had included a sampled system sound to the Macintosh operating system called Chimes. As a breach of the settlement, Apple Computers had to pay approximately $26.5 million to Apple Records. The sound for the Macintosh system was later renamed as Sosumi, to be said phonetically as Sosumi. Apple banned Pippin. Between 1995 and 1997, Apple attempted to release two multimedia technology consoles called AppWorld and AppMark. It was only released in the USA and in Japan, but Apple had to discontinue the console as they did not really see the progress that they wanted to in the game industry, as they only sold 42,000 products, but at an unreasonable high price of $599. The Apple Museum. Yes, Apple do have a museum where all their vintage work is held. It is not available for public viewing, as they believe obsessed fans will try to break in for a peek, or maybe a piece. The location of the museum is rumored to be in California at a private university called Stanford, but Apple keep their products in a different and undisclosed location, which is understandable. The voice of Siri. The voice of Siri is an American woman called Susan Bennett. In 2005, she was picked as the voice-over artist as the arranged artist was absent. She worked more than 4 hours a day, where she would just read sentences and phrases. She done this for the entire month of July in 2005 at an home recording booth. Siri's first introduction was in October 2011, when it appeared on the iPhone 4S and has then been included in all new devices since October 2012. Susan Bennett only became aware she was the voice of Siri when the iPhone 4S got released. She was notified via email from a friend. Did you also know that anything and everything you say to Siri is recorded and stored onto the Apple database for 2 years?